Thank everybody for being here today. Appreciate it. We decided to do this for the parents, record it. We get so many emails as a company, and I know industry-wide, we get a ton of emails, whether it's Riddell, Zenith, Schutt/Vices, our company, soft headgear companies about head helmet safety. Near and dear to all of our hearts. That's why we're in this business. I think everyone industry-wide, whether it is a sanctioning body, a testing organization, the NFL, the youth leagues, everyone is in it for the safety of the players. We don't always agree on what that path is, but what we want to do today is from our perspective, from my perspective, based on all that we've learned, is talk a little bit about youth football and how we know, at least as of today, the best methodology to try to keep our young people on field safe, keep the sport safe. And as parents, I just want to share my two sons played, they're 20 and 18 years old. They played hockey, tackle football. My younger son tried out for the University of Utah, walked on and was cut after 5 weeks. And as an 18-year-old, certainly the transfer portal has changed the equation a little bit, and we may have a different symposium on that in the future, but today we're really talking head health safety. And the reason I bring that up is I'm not just preaching this. This is something that I'm concerned about, that their mom was concerned about, and we're really talking today about, you know, from the JV or the junior high school level, 14 and under. I'm going to share a deck. I'm going to speak to the deck. We had about 12 great questions come through. Some of them we'll address in the course of the presentation. You'll have an opportunity after we're done to have this emailed to you, as well as add any additional questions. Obviously, when you have a lot of people on, it's hard to do live questions, but we'll do our best to accommodate everyone. And then I think you have options in here in the chat to be able to ask additional questions. I'm going to do a quick screen share. Again, my name's Nick Esayian. We're located in Carlsbad, California. We purchased the assets of SG Helmets in 2018. Right now, we've got helmets in 28 of 32 NFL locker rooms. We've got about a dozen people, 12 to 15 players. It's our first year in the NFL wearing them. We're going to talk a little bit about the difference between NFL testing and the type of equipment that's utilized there versus what we see at a youth level, the different types of testing. We've got about 40 NCAA schools utilizing our helmets. We'll talk a little bit about how helmet choices are made at the different levels. Sorry, I'm just admitting some people as we roll through here. And then we're going to get more specifically not only into helmet, but some of the other devices and concerns and considerations that exist in terms of the head health and youth safety space. So we're going to jump into this deck quick. And so optimizing youth safety. I want to play this video. It's a demonstration of a difference in helmet weight. It's anecdotal in that it's one impact, it's one player. You'll see the first is wearing a competitive helmet. The second is wearing our helmet. I'm not doing this necessarily to sell our helmets, but we are going to talk about helmet weight today, and I want to show you an example. Here we go. This first clip's on turf. And as you can see, our favorite Utah quarterback here in the Rose Bowl has a head-to-ground injury and ends up leaving the game, gets checked out. He's fine, but obviously ruined his night. A scary moment for everyone, including his folks, teammates, and I'm sure everybody else that was watching. Now, here he is, different helmet, ours, head to ground on turf, significant impact. And again, anecdotal. I mean, if you took 1,000 of these, you may have different outcomes, but the energy equation is the mass times 2 times the velocity squared. We can't do anything about velocity in football, but we certainly can reduce the mass. And this is an example of that. Football's safer now than it's ever been. You have great organizations like NOCSAE, the labs that are independent at Virginia Tech, a whole different tranche in terms of how we're evaluating injury, who can call out an injury, coaching techniques, the way we treat injury. And I'm not a physician. I don't purport to be. We'll skirt around some of those issues. But football is safer now than it ever has been to play. Recently in the news, we've seen some of these tragedies, and the last couple of weeks, there's about 5.65 million young people, young being from 6 years old up to 46 if you're Tom Brady in his last year playing football. And annually there's a fatality. There are 2 fatalities. Every one of these is a tragedy. There are injuries, but the number of fatalities in football is far less than in many other sports, whether it's motocross, the highest concussed sport right now in the US. And there's some argument about this because of what's actually diagnosed as a concussion versus what happens and is not diagnosed, but girls soccer. And it is a collision sport, meaning football. And there is risk to it, but there's so many great benefits that the kids, they learn in terms of grit, goal setting, working with all different kids. We feel that, we've seen in California here, there has been legislation trying to outlaw football for kids 14 and under, at least tackle football. And there's been great resistance, not only from people in the football space, but other sports spaces. And, it can happen here or can be contested in New York, and it can happen in your neck of the woods as well. Football has risks. Some injuries are reported, some are not. We saw NFL, the concussion rate was up almost 18% in 2022. Arguable, some of that is because there's been more of a focus on diagnosing it. In terms of concussion, every state is a bit different in terms of diagnosis on what you diagnose as a parent, what the athlete diagnoses, the coach diagnoses. We're not really going to get into that today just because it's I'm not an expert in that space, but I just want to point out that this is something that you need to be aware of. But at the same point, the benefits of the sport far outweigh what we feel the risks are. But how do we mitigate those risks and try to keep them to a minimum? The industry, for a long time, did not do a lot of self-policing. You can go back and, man, when I played, you couldn't even drink water at practice. And I'm probably older than everyone on the call at 56 years old, but it seems ridiculous. Also, hey, if your mind's clear, get back in the game. There wasn't any diagnosis. The equipment was old. It wasn't certified. The people that were fitting equipment were not necessarily trained. There weren't the requisite medical personnel on staff. Right now, we've seen movement, but there's still been a stagnation in the helmet space. You'll see a helmet that tests on Virginia Tech, and Virginia Tech's independent lab that tests these helmets, and it does really well. And it looks like the helmet your son or daughter's wearing, but they may be wearing a different model. And just because it's called the Acme XYZ, you may be getting the Acme ABC, meaning it's a $600 helmet. Here's a $200 helmet. They look the same. One tests well, one's not even on the list. Does that matter? It absolutely does matter. Fitment matters. Fatigue matters. Neck strength matters. We're going to talk about those. NOCSAE is a fantastic organization that goes through a very specified process in terms of the actual helmet itself and doing a variety of tests on the helmet, the masks, how the masks integrate with the helmet, how we do business as helmet companies and what we're responsible for in terms of our design, supply line, quality control, the ability to be able to conduct a recall if necessary. And we're audited annually, and new models are tested as we go, and old models have to be recertified. They do an outstanding job. It's one of the hardest things and why there are so few helmet companies, because you have to deal with insurance, you have to deal with research and development, bringing things to market, but you also have to meet these safety requirements, and they're necessary. And the industry's come a long way in putting these things in place. 2 studies were conducted, one at the University of Ottawa, one at Virginia Tech, and a determination was made that in the near future here, youth helmet standard will include a weight maximum for 14 and under of 3.5 pounds. There's still some gyrations in terms of the details of how the testing will be done, what head form, et cetera. But we know that, at least from our board of physicians and a variety of other studies, that helmet weight, especially at a youth level, can add to the severity and the frequency of injury. Your neck is really fulcrum, and when you start snapping additional weight out at the outside perimeter of that spectrum, you're adding more energy into a whole variety of collisions, including head to ground. What we see jump to this next slide, you'll see these NFL helmet tests come out and helmet ratings come out. And, okay, we're highly recommended helmet. Our NFL Gladiator ATK is a great helmet, performed in the dark green. That's great. Is that the best helmet for your 10 or 12-year-old? You'd see that and you're like, I'm going to go out and spend $1,000 on a Gladiator ATK or a Riddell XYZ or a Visus or a Zenith. Those helmets are designed for, and it even says right here on the slide, and I'm going to read this because it's really in the small print on the right here, but the laboratory test conditions were intended to represent potentially concussive head impacts in the NFL. The results of this study should not be extrapolated to college, high school, and youth football. One of the biggest objections when we were a newcomer into this industry was, you're not on the NFL test, or you're not on the NFL list. And the people that started this company, Bill Simpson and Chip Ganassi, were in the auto race industry. And if you've ever seen Simpson Racing decal on something, it could be a seat, it could be a composite helmet, seat belts, window nets, etc. That technology was moved over to football. And at the time, there were no NFL tests in place. Jeff Saturday, Dwight Freeney wore this helmet 2011, 2012. And when we came to market, the testing really was not super friendly to lighter helmets. And our design probably had a ways to go in terms of the type of impacts that we're seeing on the NFL field. At a youth level, everything that we introduced was Virginia Tech 5-star. And like I had mentioned earlier, we have 14 docs that help us develop this technology, work with an engineering firm to provide what we feel is the safest helmet that can be purchased for youth. And now we have a different design than others at the NFL. The challenge is that many youth coaches, high school coaches, parents will look at just the NFL test and say, that's the helmet I want. Well, that's not the best helmet for your son or daughter that's 6 years old, 8 years old, 10 years old. Those tests are conducted at some speeds over 9 meters a second. It's 20 miles an hour. The only time your son or daughter is going to be going 20 miles an hour associated with game day is in the SUV on the way to the game with mom or dad. The helmets are too stiff. In some cases, they're far too heavy. They're too big. But, brand names are built on Saturday and Sunday. And this list does help in terms of providing credibility to all the vendors that are on it. And things that are learned at these higher velocities can be applied at the lower velocities. But one thing that you should be aware of is the NFL in their own disclaimer saying that this list is not necessarily the list that you should be using for your youth player or your high school player. So you have NOCSAE, who approves helmets. They regulate the industry. They come up with different audits and things that the companies need to comply with. You have the NFL that tests, and they're only testing specific helmets that are submitted that meet a certain criteria. Once they pass and they're on the dark green or green, players can select them in the locker room. Equipment managers buy them, bring them in, or a player will request it. A lot of the colleges will use the NFL, NFLPA list as well. And, is it a good litmus test? I believe so. I think that the NFL's shown that they've got foresight because they continue to make changes to the test as they learn more and as they have more data and they have more field data. That said, we can look at certain position-specific helmets that are touted as a game changer, and You have 16 quarterbacks that have selected to wear it. 12 played a single play, and there were 5 concussions in that helmet last year. That concussion rate is not a fantastic number to boast about. There are other helmets that have a fantastic rate, and any injury is too much. But what I'm trying to communicate here is that the NFL list is a litmus test for the college and the NFL level. High school level, Virginia Tech, their test, their impact points, the speed of impact are different. They have a star system from 5-star all the way down to 1-star. A lot of high schools will require that helmets have to be a 5-star for them to be purchased. And as you can see, this is just what you're looking at right now on this deck on the right. There are far more helmets than what's listed here. This is just a summary. Our Gladiator ATK's third. There's a solid Zenith helmet and one of the Vice's lineman helmets that perform better on this particular test. There's also a youth version of this test, and the youth version, the impacts are closer to what you'll see in a youth level of play, and the test reflects that. We can go through our helmets here. Of course, we feel that they're the lightest, the fastest, and the safest design with our doctors. This is not a sales pitch today, so we're going to jump through our product line. I will say that just like our competitors, our Gladiator line is designed for NFL college players. Our LS2 design is designed for a D2, D3 player, high school player, and then there are youth versions of that. And of course, we have a flag football headgear. We have a lot of people involved in our company, and as do all of the other manufacturers. The young man that you saw in that first video clip, Cam Rising, was a quarterback, or is a quarterback at the University of Utah, had that head injury, came back, wore a helmet for the year, experienced 7 targeting calls against him, didn't have an injury. His family actually ended up investing in our company, which is a pretty solid compliment. Jordan Palmer owns part of our company, Tony Romo, Darius Robinson's involved, Drew Stanton, Tyrod Taylor, and again, we've increased the number of NFL teams that shows on this slide. One of the things that we see are, whether it's a Dan Orshlovsky from ESPN, whether it's a Jeff Garcia, whether it's a Dr. Peter Cummins that's involved with TB12, they choose light for their kids, and one of the things is helmet weight. We're going to get beyond that, and we're going to jump out of this presentation. If I can stop sharing screen here. All right. I think now you guys are back, just looking at me. Let's make sure everybody's let in here. So the things I want to talk about today are fitment. And regardless of what helmet you select, fitment's key. You can purchase the best rated helmet if it doesn't fit right. If mom or dad's walking through the Pop Warner or the AYF line, and the helmet's too big, it's too small, the jaw pads aren't, firm up against the cheek. The helmet doesn't have the NOCSAE sticker on the back that shows that it's compliant. All of those things should concern you, any type of oddity or damage. Some parents dig deep into the helmet and they show up at our doorstep, or they jump on the Riddell site, or they jump on the Zenith site, Schutt site, and they buy something else. Some parents don't look at these helmets at all. I would urge you, number one, and there's a great site, and this will be in the deck that we sent out, but it's helmetfitting.com. And they have different helmet models there. It shows you how to fit it to your young athlete so that you get the best fitment available. And it's not only the chin strap fit, but it's also how the pads on the inside of the helmet interact with the youth player's head. But some common sense too: any damage to the shell, any damage to the liner, chin cup, face mask attachments, all should be inspected. And you have that. So that's the inspection and the fitment. Virginia Tech 5-star helmet, if it's a young player, look at the youth standard, look at the varsity standard, depending on what level of play. 14 and under usually are looking at the youth. Obviously, you have 14-year-olds now that are 200 plus pounds that can run, a sub 540. You're probably looking at a varsity there. I would defer to each manufacturer's sizing chart, and they all have customer service where you can check in. For us, we really, draw the line at that 14 and under. And once you start getting to the 140, 150 pound range up, you transition to a varsity. Sometimes you'll have head sizes that preclude wearing a youth helmet or preclude wearing a varsity helmet, even though there's some overlap there. I would be remiss if I didn't think we were making the best helmet. That's why we're in business here. We're here to protect players. We're here to make money. We're here to advance the cause of what we feel can help foster football well into the future, which is reducing the weight of helmet and headgear. We see more movement toward that. We even see it in our competitor slogans and promotional materials saying it feels lighter. Well, there is a youth helmet that is almost 6 pounds. 6 pounds. If you have a 60-pound player, that's 10% of their body weight. And I'm going to give you a secret and say that I would be wearing a 22-pound helmet if I were wearing something 10% of my body weight. There's not a single pediatrician, orthopedist, trauma doc, neurologist that thinks I should be wearing a 22-pound helmet when I'm involved in an 80G impact running a seam route. So these are the things that you want to be thinking of. Some of it's common sense, but we go back to our helmet selection, our fitment. What else can we do? There are a variety of studies that show that neck strength can also be tied to the frequency or lack thereof of head injury, concussion, as well as severity. There are some great products on the market. The one that we are big proponents of here internally is Iron Neck. And, we don't think about this, but if you're watching a group of 8-year-olds playing and the youth helmets weigh from 3 pounds up to 5 pounds and, 5.5 pounds, even closer to 6 pounds with a visor, with paint, with a big chin cup on it, especially when they get moist or damp, that makes a difference. Neck strength makes a huge difference. Should you be training neck? Sure. Do most people think about training neck? Absolutely not. Every parent, if you walk to a youth football game, thinks their son or daughter's going to be playing in the NFL. Everyone's got a coach. Everybody's got, all the gear, the gloves, the swag, neck strengthening devices. There are a variety of them. We're a big proponent of Iron Neck. They make a variety of products. I don't think you need to buy the most expensive one, but this goes back once again to what's our list. Helmet, Virginia Tech 5-star NOCSAE approved and compliant, that it fits properly, that there's no damage to it, that we're working on neck strength. The other thing is you have shoulder pads and other accessories that get changed, chin cups, etc. Was that chin cup designed for that particular helmet? Is that face mask designed for that particular helmet? These are a lot of questions, but there are things that you should be aware of and at least pay attention to. Neck strength component of it. Yep. NFL players have fabulous neck strength, right? I mean, these are Olympic athletes. You saw our quarterback from Utah get hit and his head slam back. You cannot resist all forces when you start to talk about 50, 60, 70 G impacts. At a youth level, a lot of these injuries are caused by head to ground. And again, that goes back to helmet weight. We do think that if you pick a Virginia Tech 5-star helmet that's NOCSAE approved, that you should look for something that fits properly, but also is the lightest weight possible. And why are some helmets lighter than others? Frankly, with our higher price youth helmet, we use Aramid, trade name is a Kevlar shell, which is a different type of shell. In our NFL helmet, we use a nylon shell. There are internal components in some of these helmets that make them significantly more expensive or significantly heavier. And I will say with a high level of confidence that weight plays into the safety equation. Some of the questions that came through earlier today is, outside of getting a lighter helmet, what do you think is the number one things parents can do to mitigate head injuries in youth football? I think you need to meet the coaches that are coaching your kids. Technique, are they gone through for that particular league training to identify injury, tackling technique, all of the small things. The people that are coaching your son or daughter when they're playing football, it's so critical that they are curating and they're volunteering their time, but you still need to be comfortable with how they're treating the players, how they're interacting with the players, how they check in when there's a potential injury. And if you see something, say something. And whether that is a drill or an issue, we've all seen the videos of the overbearing parent. I could have been that person at one point in time, where you want to intervene. And this isn't a playing time issue. This is not a performance issue. This is not a coach getting after your son or daughter after they jumped off sides 3 times. But these are we running common sense drills? Are they compliant? There are actually laws in California that where there's limitations on the amount of contact per week. Even in high school, when can you start contact? As parents, you should be aware of these things, and work with your son or daughter and coaching staff to make sure that we're all in the right space. None of us want to be the squeaky wheel with the coach because we can create issues there. But I will tell you that the coaching component of this and being involved, talking to your son or daughter, especially on the way home, on the drive to practice, on the way back from practice, knowing what the symptoms are for various injuries is also key. That helmet selection process, when you show up at the shipping container and mom or dad is there as a volunteer, putting a helmet on your son or daughter for the 30 seconds that they're standing there, isn't necessarily fitment. How that helmet fits when they're sweating and they're running and it's 90 degrees out and you're in Central Texas, that situation's far different than the 30 seconds of putting a helmet on. So those are individual things. I would say all the strength training, hydration, training in the off season, when you just show up and, hey, we're going to play football. We went to Dick's and we bought our son or daughter a new helmet and they're out there playing. Can you do that? Absolutely. Do we want the kids that last minute made a change to play? Absolutely. Does that mean that they're prepared? Absolutely not. You take these high-end high schools, the performance training that goes on in the off season, whether it's nutrition, flexibility, strength training, and we talk about focusing on the neck, the rest of the body, all of those things are critical in trying to reduce the risk coefficient for your son or daughter. Next question. What's the new NOCSAE helmet weight standard and when will it be implemented? There's very granular data on the NOCSAE site. I look at this at a high level, so I don't want to misspeak, but they went through arduous period of time of doing 2 studies, came to the determination that helmet weight is a factor, and especially for younger players, and that number's been pegged at 3.5 pounds. That standard's not yet in play. It's proposed standard because there's some details that need to be knocked out on it, but that's the direction of NOCSAE. But you'll also see companies like Zenith talking about helmet weight at a pro level. When you have a helmet that weighs 4.2 pounds for a professional player that trains 365 days a year, that's got a mature cervical structure, and there are youth helmets that weigh 2 pounds more than that, that's a concern. I wouldn't allow my son, frankly, to wear, if he were 6 or 7 or 8 years old, a helmet that weighed almost 6 pounds or 5.5 pounds, versus the helmets that are out there in that 3.5 pound range. NOCSAE's gone through this exercise. They've been very detail oriented in terms of how they've gotten to where they're at. Now they're, hopefully get it across the finish line soon. Light helmets is already there. That's what's pushed our designs from the beginning. Taken military technology and auto racing technology that when those type of protective pieces of equipment fail, there's a fatality. There's not a single motocross rider. There's not a single Navy SEAL. There's not a single Formula One driver that wants a heavier helmet. Because when you apply lateral G's or impact to weight and accelerate it, there's more energy in that contact. AB1 website for literature and state-approved websites. So AB1 is in reference to the California law that was, or legislature that was passed, gosh, I think it was 2 years ago now. And a good friend of mine, Steve Famiano, pushed hard against groups of people in the state of California that were trying to make youth football for 14 and under players something that wasn't going to happen anymore. And it's been pushed through the legislature, I think 3 or 4 times. And ironically, the governor of California was the one that actually vetoed it. Without getting into the politics of it, my personal opinion, if I take my light hat off, Since I don't know anyone here, I see Mike Oliver on his name on the bottom, but I think as a parent, I want to make decisions related to my son or daughter in conjunction with them. I don't want the state making decisions for them. My younger son played hockey for a long time, and when he was done, he was looking for a home, for a sport that he could play. If somebody had said when he's in 7th grade that mom and dad can't decide with him that he's going to play football, boy, that really to me impinges on my freedoms and my responsibilities as a parent to help guide and curate my own son or daughter. So there's been a lot of back and forth politics, and don't think that it can't happen in your state. This has gone on in California for a period of time, back and forth over the last 3 or 4 years. I believe it's also gone on in the state of New York. And, we work with the organizations that are pushing back against that to leave that decision-making power in the hands of parents. And we feel that football is such a great sport for the young men and women that have the opportunity to play it. People that don't have a son or daughter or that haven't played don't always understand, but it's important that you're familiar with what's going on in states like California. There's an AB1 website. You can look at the literature and see what's going on there because it may end up happening in a state that you're in. What is the current reconditioning requirements, costs, and turnaround time? I can only speak to our helmet and then industry in general, and that is also very dependent on whether it's a high school, whether it's a Pop Warner League, et cetera. I believe the requirement is that all helmets get refurbished every 2 years. There'll be a sticker on the back that the manufacturer applies once the helmet's inspected. There are high schools here in California that in pro teams, college teams, even youth leagues, they refurbish their helmets every year. There are 2 levels of refurbishment that we have at Light. They're flat rates. So when you send a helmet to Light, it's $40, $45. There's an inspection that's done. It's cleaned. Everything's gone over with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that the helmet's in outstanding condition, meets all the requirements. The new sticker goes on it. It gets packaged up, back out, it gets sent. There's another level of refurbishment where if you have custom color, where the whole helmet is completely dismantled, taken apart, cleaned, inspected, anything's replaced that needs to be replaced. The helmet is repainted. In some cases, the mask will be redipped and then they're returned. If you have a helmet that's on the 14th string punter, it's never been worn, it's never come into contact with someone else, is at the $40 refurbishment with us? Probably. If it's on the starting middle linebacker, he's making contact a lot, is that more likely going to be the higher level refurbishment? Absolutely. Other companies handle things different ways. Light refurbishes all of our helmets ourselves. Everything's sent here, everything's checked in here, inspected here, and sent out from our facility. We may use third parties in the future, but we are not now. One of the things we run into are a lot of the municipal contract for school districts, especially predominantly public schools, are that they can buy any helmet they want as long as it's Virginia Tech 5-star, but one of the companies, one of our competitors, has to refurbish it. That doesn't work for us. We want to control our own destiny. We want to control our customer, how they're serviced, how those products are refurbished. The other challenges with that are, in many cases, if a school sends in 100 helmets, they will get a notice back that 10 of these helmets had catastrophic failures and they can't be refurbished. We're only going to return 90 of them back to you. What about the other 10? Well, you got to buy new helmets. Well, if Company A is doing the refurbishment and they're refurbishing Company B's helmets, it's a quick way to take helmets out of circulation and infuse your helmets. I'm not saying that's always done intentionally, or is it done intentionally? But what I am saying is that something people need to be aware of individually. The biggest challenge is when your season ends, send your helmet in to be refurbished. People wait too long and then they don't get their helmet back on time. And that's one of the biggest challenges. Some of the companies do their helmets directly. Some of them use a third-party refurbishing center. As a parent, my suggestion would be go to the manufacturer, have them do the work, have them check it, and back you get it, and off and running you are. Light versus the top 5, using cutaways and half sections of Light, and top 5 competitors explain Light's mechanical and engineering advantages. when we purchased this company at the end of 2018, one of the biggest things that we were focused on and that the prior owners were focused on was helmet weight. If you take a 2-pound construction hammer versus a 1-pound construction hammer, drop them from the same height, the amount of kinetic energy produced by the 2-pound construction hammer is greater than the 1-pound construction hammer. When you start to add 20 G's of force, the 2-pound of weight difference in our helmet compared to someone else in an 80 G impact, that's 160 pounds. 160 additional pounds of force on the cervical structure. Shake a Chobani yogurt with the lid still on it. That's a rough example, but the energy equation, weight, when it's uncontrolled and it starts getting snapped around, is not only wear and tear on cervical structure, but other parts of the body. So we've got a lot of videos online where it's not the CEO of the company having the discussion. Dr. Sean Evans, who's a trauma physician here, Dr. Tal David was the head physician, the San Diego Chargers for over a decade, Dr. Peter Cummins, Dr. John Schleimer. If you're down in the Florida area, Michael McDermott, he's the head of neurosurgery at Baptist Health, and many others including Paul Gaspar, David Straight. They have their doctorates in physical therapy. When they get together, they help us design these things. In the youth helmets that we are currently selling, our LS2 youth helmets, there are 2 versions of it. There's a lower cost helmet with a polycarbonate shell that's a more traditional shell, like our competitors. It's a plastic shell. It's a Virginia Tech 5-star helmet. It weighs a couple ounces more than the higher level youth helmet, which has a aramid or tri-weave, better known as Kevlar shell. The other components of those helmets are exactly the same. The shell is the only difference. The goal in using these simple designs is we basically took an auto race helmet or a combat helmet where you'll see the composite shell, you'll see an expanded polypropylene. It looks like a black foam liner, fitment pads that, depending on what you select, and there's some different costs associated with a D30 pad versus a regular foam pad. And then the face masks. Our face masks are chromoly tubing for youth helmets. People say, gosh, why would I want to use tubing? Well, it really came from the auto race industry. There's more surface area, so they meet or exceed all the requirements, but they're closer to the weight of a titanium mask, which costs significantly more. Our titanium masks for NFL helmets are upwards of $200. The weight of the titanium mask and our chromoly tubing masks are almost, for a youth helmet, are almost identical, and you're getting that included in the helmet along with a quality sports star chin strap, the various fitment pads to be able to customize, just like a helmet that's scanned. You can move the pads around in the helmet to get to fit your young athlete. My head shape might be different than my son's head shape, even though the diameter is different. How that helmet fits can be very different, and being able to move these malleable pads around gets you a perfect fit. And that's not only for safety, but it's also for comfort. There's nothing more challenging than, as a youth coach, is everyone gets out there, everyone's gone through their helmet fitment, which they put the helmet on and take it off in 30 seconds. And now you have a third of the 7-year-olds yelling at you that, they have a headache, or the helmet's too tight, or the jaw pad fell out, or the air bladders are not full, whatever that might be. One of the things we've done to reduce those complaints, in addition to the reduction in weight and the ability to customize the fit of the helmet, is we don't have air bladders in our helmets. If you're at sea level, that air bladder might be inflated perfectly. If everyone checks their helmet every week or 2 weeks to make sure that, hey, no air is coming out of that. If your tires change based on temperature, elevation, those helmet bladders are going to change as well. So, I'm going to play at 2,000 feet today, or I'm going to play in Denver. Now you have an overinflated bladder. You're in Wisconsin and it's cold out, you have an underinflated bladder. Is somebody getting the tool out and actually making that adjustment, or are they only pulling the tool out when the thing deflates completely? We've taken that variable out of the helmet, and the foams that we use operate very consistently in the parameters of temperatures that most youth players play, which may be, 20 degrees Fahrenheit up to, say, 120 degrees, 130 degrees Fahrenheit. There's always some change in diameter, meaning how squishy the pads are based on temperature, but the materials we use are very similar to what's in the combat helmet. And the military's done a great job of trying to take those variables out depending on temperature, humidity, how many times it's flexed, how quick does that foam recover. There are helmets that use this wonderful comfort foam. You put it on and it's like a plush mattress, as it touches your head. When that foam gets cold and the helmet's sitting, your son or daughter is the second string quarterback and they sweat it up, got it hot, and it's 30 degrees out. They put their helmet down. They don't have a helmet heater. That padding completely changes, and now they got to put the helmet on and run out there. Our materials are much more static in their characteristics. So the balance of the helmet too, front to back, if you have a steel face mask, it pulls the helmet forward. And an NFL player, does that make a difference? It may or may not. NFL players are thrilled to lose 2 pounds because Formula One car will spend $2 million to eliminate a pound or 2 pounds from that car driver package. NFL player is thrilled to do that. But if you have a youth player and you have a super heavy mask and the helmet's out of balance and it's constantly pulling their head down, this goes back up to heads up tackling, the rugby tackling, and all the new techniques that have been brought to bear. But those are really the majority of questions. Mark, did we get any new questions that I might have missed?
There was one question from Terry that came in that says, your data says that concussions were up 18% in 2022 and are rising. With all the new helmet technologies, I'd be interested to know what is the primary driver causing the increase in concussions.
So someone asked about our data. I think it was Terry Schneider, I think. Concussions were up per NFL numbers in 2022 by 18%. Last year, they were closer to static. They increased, but not nearly as much. If you ask some people, it's because they're more of a focus on concussion and more being diagnosed. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm in that space. I have my opinions, but I'd be speaking from opinion only. I think that that's part of it. Now, remember, this is only an NFL number. This is not this is not being monitored in a granular scientific manner at a high school or a D2 or a D3 or the youth level. It's very hard when you have 40 kids and they're recycling field every 2 hours, and there's not sensors in everyone's helmets. And then when you have sensors in the helmet, you can have somebody that has a 60 G impact and they're fine, and you have somebody that has a 10 G impact and they're not fine. So it's very challenging. What I think we have seen is helmets for a long time, when tested, when a lot of this testing started, if you added weight to the helmet, they would perform better. I won't say which test it is, but we had our LS2 varsity helmet. We tested it, and it was middle of the pack. When we added 2 pounds of weight to it, superfluous weight, the helmet tested much better. Does that mean there was any more impact absorbing materials, or did it simply mean that it performed better when someone was shooting, a device at it and recording that data? We have a school here, Mar Vista High School in San Diego. They were using a competitor's helmet that they buy new helmets every 2 or 3 years. They had 17 concussions in 2022. They switched to light LS2s, no Gladiators, the LS2, and they went down to 2 concussions. They actually had 2 more, but they were kids that insisted on wearing the helmets from the prior year. So going from 17 to 2 is a material difference. Now, again, that's not quote unquote scientific data, but going back to that 18%, that's an NFL number. And I will say this, that the NFL spends not millions, but tens of millions of dollars a year to monitor all of these players, their pellets in the shoulder pads to monitor the speed. They recreate many of these impacts utilizing video to show the angle of attack of the body, how the forces are transmitted. It's in their best interest to keep these players on the field. I don't believe that there's anyone in this industry that's doing something intentionally or nefarious at all. But I do think that there are more innovative ways to protect players. And we feel that we're following the science in that the reduction in weight while maintaining a structure of a helmet that protects against the initial impact is the way to go. And we'll continue down that path. Our goal next year is that our varsity helmet will be at or just above 3 pounds. And that's half the weight of some of the helmets that are on the market, with the big lineman mask and a visor in it and everything else. I will also say that I have 2 customers. Most of the people on this call are customer B. Customer A, and I'm not prioritizing, is the 6 to 46-year-old player. And guess what they care about? How does it look? Who's wearing it? And am I going to play better? It's all they care about. The person that's buying that helmet, whether it's a parent, whether it's the youth league, which is usually a bunch of parents that are making a purchase decision, whether it's the high school, which it could be the coach, the athletic director, the district, whether it's a D2 or D3 college that may have an global equipment manager. It might be a specific equipment manager in college or in the NFL. It might be a league like in the UFL. Those people are looking at, hey, are these helmets safe? And how do I make that decision? Do I look at the NFL test? You should if you're on the NFL. If you're an NFL equipment manager, is that the only thing I should be looking at? Nope. Are there vendors that are 2 steps ahead of that test? We'd like to think that we are, based on the weight and the materials that we're using. The NFL helped design the inside, and this is actually one of the helmets, and it's going to be hard to see here. There's a company called Clyde in Canada that won a Head Health Tech Challenge, and we incorporated that technology into this helmet. It's 3D printed lattice. The NFL spent a ton of money on conducting the contest, awarding the grants to Clyde, who collaborated with us, and they're a partner. That technology would have never even gotten to the field if it weren't for the NFL's effort. So I think we need to take the data that exists. We need to look forward. I think that competition is important. I'd love to see other organizations, whether it's companies out of the Department of Defense, whether it was universities, whether it was other leagues, that would put their own test criteria together. That's on our 3-year goal list, to create our own test criteria. And people are like, hey, Nick, you're crazy. You create a test criteria that, would of course award your product number 1. We'd like to think we can get there. But the reality is that there are a lot of factors in this. And, you can't test for every conceivable environmental impact, whether it's temperature, elevation, humidity, how fatigued is the player, what impact does fatigue have on the frequency of injury or severity of injury. You have all of these different factors, and the tests have to be repeatable. And you can't change everything every year, otherwise all the historical data goes away. So this is not an easy nut to crack, but I will say to everyone that's here, I've been, over the last 6 years, when we took this over and we got things started, we had great proof of concept. We sold everything that we could make. The pandemic hit, and we really put our heads down and focused on bringing in the best group of physicians to help us design the best helmets with firms, not only that the NFL helped perpetuate and fund in Clyde, but local firms here in San Diego that are in the heart of the Department of Defense that make components and headgear and helmets for, the big defense contractors. And much has been learned in wartime. Our investors include 6 special operations personnel that wore all of these materials in battle along the way. And they're invested in this because they know that it works. The Drew Stattons, the Tyrod Taylors, the Tony Romos, those people that have invested in this, not only for players at the NFL level, but their kids are wearing these helmets. And you can learn more about us on the website, but I will tell everyone this, that I'm in NFL locker rooms and I'm a fan like anybody else. I play fantasy football like anyone else. I watch football like anyone else. I actually play in the 35+ flag football league with Jeff Garcia and don't play nearly as well as he does. But the one thing we all have in common is football is part of the solution in this country. There's a lot of division. There's a lot of people playing too many video games. There's a lot of issues. There's a lot of conflict. But when you are at a game on a Friday night when you're a game on a Saturday, when you're a game on a Sunday, it doesn't matter. The race color creed of those kids, their goal on 3rd and 8 is to pick up those 8 yards, to work together. They learn grit, they learn determination, they learn goal setting. I think it's the best sport out of any sport, and all the sports are great. I was in professional auto racing for 27 years. It's really a selfish and individual sport. The crew gives you the car and you go and do your best to get close to wrecking it, but not wreck it with 27 other or 30 other egomaniacs. You can win a championship by winning 3 or 4 races. That doesn't happen in football. Everyone has to work together. So we all need to be ambassadors for the sport. And that goes for the helmet vendors. That goes for the companies that are purveyors of safety. That goes for the parents. That goes for the coaches. The media is not always kind to the sport, but we all know what it does for these young people, and it builds confidence, internal confidence. One of the things that Jordan Palmer told me is he's like, there's 2 kinds of confidences, Nick. There's external confidence. Hey, your hair looks great today. That's a nice car. Really like your shirt. Good job. Man, that was a nice vacation you went on. Then there's internal confidence when you throw 3 interceptions in the first half, your team's down on you, and you have to go back out there, face everyone in the huddle, and throw that same out pattern again. And it happens over and over and over and over and over. We had a high school young man in here, quarterback, that had transferred, and he had said to his teammates at a team dinner, the best thing I ever did was transfer from Las Vegas to this team in San Diego. I'm so sorry, in the second game, I threw 3 interceptions. When I walked out to my car, people had written notes and stuck it on my car. You suck, go back to Vegas, etc. He said, I sat there for half an hour and cried. And I got a lump in my throat listening to this kid's story. And I printed out the man in the arena speech. And I gave it to the young man. And I said, hey, Jack, I want you to read this before the game tomorrow. He read it. I was hopeful that he read it. Someone tapped me on the shoulder the next day and said, are you Nick Esayian? And I said, yes. And she said, my son's Jack, and his room was a disaster. There's crap all over his room, but on his end table, he has his phone and his iWatch. The only place that's clean in the entire room. And folded up there was a piece of paper, and she thought he had gotten a ticket. And when she opened it, it was the man in the arena speech. So I will tell you that aside from the helmet, I would print that out, and any young player that you're dealing with, when they're having a tough day, you read them that speech. And if you can get through it without getting a little crackle in your voice, I'll be shocked. But that's exactly why we're all here today. And you guys took time on the East Coast. I know it's late, so I'll stop pontificating, but yeah, print that out, read it, let your son or daughter read it. We're all here for the same reason. If you have questions, feel free to email. You'll get an email. Mark, when will that go out? Well, probably tomorrow. You'll be able to respond with questions. We'll send a version of this deck out. We did this informally today. We could not do this. Somebody was like, oh my God, you're opening yourself up to liability in doing this. No, we're communicating with our customers. Our customers are players. When we're out there showing them how slick things look, we need to talk. We talk to the equipment managers in the NFL and the NCAA every day. The people that are making the decisions shouldn't be making their decisions simply off an ad or a website. And we have customer service here too. If you have questions after the fact, you can shoot a note in, and a person will respond, not a computer. Awesome. I appreciate everyone being here today. We have a bunch of people on here, so it's hard to ask questions, but email your questions and I will email the question and my response to the group. We'll try to do this again, and we hope that you'll invite all of your friends, and we'll also put the recording up so that other people can see it after the fact. Thanks to all. Bye-bye.